My name is Major General Morgan Hayes, and right now I'm leaning against the marble balustrade of Union Station's Grand Hall, trying not to let the chatter and clinking glasses get under my skin. It's June 12th, 2025, Washington, D.C., and this wedding reception is going viral. Hashtag Carter Hayes wedding already has 500,000 views on the live feed, but nobody's talking about me. The high-ceilinged atrium is a swirl of military dress blues, cocktail gowns, and press badges. The giant LED screen above the orchestra rail is looping clips of the bride and groom smiling for Vogue and GQ. While on the fringe of all that gloss, I stand in my olive green service dress, the polished brass of my rank shining like a beacon that no one will acknowledge. I have a compass strapped to my left wrist, its needle quivering between true north and true self, and a single red poppy pinned over my heart, the only poppy I'll ever wear again in memory of the ones who didn't make it home. My phone buzzed an hour ago with a notification from Marcus and Gwen at Army Public Affairs telling me the hashtag #HonorMorgan was trending worldwide, the result he hinted of something big about to drop on that screen. But for now, nobody cares. My own sister, Grace Carter. 35 years old, polished to perfection in a silver sheath dress. Her career as a PR maven at Carter & Co. Riding this family event has conspired with our mother to scrub me off the guest list. When my invitation arrived, embossed in gold foil and sealed with the Carter family crest, my title was nowhere to be seen. They just printed M. Hayes and wrote, "Please come, but don't make it about you." I traced the raised letters with a fingertip that trembled more than I ever admit. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I packed my bags in Stuttgart and got on a flight. Because I've spent my life running toward danger, dragging wounded men back from death, and never once have I let fear stall my orders. Risk is part of my job description today. It's wearing this uniform among people who would rather I be invisible. I tuck my phone into my breast pocket and let the fold of my jacket rest heavy on my chest, the weight of every medal, every ribbon, a reminder that I fought for honor, but never expected it from them. The station's dome lets in a wash of golden late afternoon sunlight that glints off silver cutlery and chandeliers. The air is cool, fragrant with lilies and expensive cologne. I look away from the live cameras whirring overhead, and I see Sam Ortiz, former combat medic turned civilian nurse, lingering by the bar, her eyes fixed on me like a lifeline. I stole her number from an old field report, and she said she'd be here if I needed backup. I haven't decided if I'll call her over or keep her at arm's length. And next to her stands Chloe Kim, freelance war correspondent, whose viral article on my unit's evacuation in Mosul won her a Pulitzer shortlist. She's got a press badge swinging from her neck, but her expression isn't professional curiosity, it's solidarity. Beyond them, I catch a glimpse of Colonel Richard Carter, the groom's father, the same man I pulled from burning steel and shrapnel 12 years ago in Baghdad. His gaze flickers toward me, and for a moment, I think he'll come over, but he's flanked by aides and photographers. He raises a glass in my direction. No words, just a steady salute of his wine glass rim, and the moment freezes. I feel my heart kick once hard, but I don't move. I've learned that power isn't in reaction. It's in presence. I'm here not for forgiveness, but to let the truth speak. Around me, the sea of guests shifts, aides whisper into headsets, tour groups of think tank interns snap selfies, and a gaggle of five-star generals in tuxedos tilt their heads in silent respect. They aren't family, but they understand something that my own blood can't. The roast of lamb on the buffet table steams, but my stomach is stone. I place a fingertip over the poppy and think of every time I was told to shrink to demote my rank when my mother was present to hide my uniform under civilian clothes at Daddy's funeral, to sit in back of the church in Stuttgart like a museum relic. But today, I'm the exhibit they can't ignore. My invitation leaps back into my mind. The crease where I pressed my thumb through the sealed edges felt like a grenade in my palm. They wanted to warn me off, but warnings and grenades both require me to decide. I decided to come. The violinist's crescendo cuts off abruptly as Grace Carter, the bride's eldest sister, an unofficial MC for the evening, steps up to the microphone. She delivers her welcome speech in a voice too sweet. "We're so thrilled you could join us for Andrew and Julia's special day. Family means everything. She glances in my direction just for a second. That stretches like a knife, and we hope you enjoy tonight's celebrations. Laughter, polite applause. She's living the role she wrote for herself, the dutiful daughter, the brand ambassador, the one who knows how to script love and loyalty. But she scripted me out. As she closes with a toast to new beginnings, the LED screen behind her flickers, then goes black. My pulse throbs in my ears. I see Marcus and Gwyn, at the corner of my eye, tapping on his tablet like a conductor about to drop a bomb. The guests pause in mid-toast glasses, half-raised eyes drifting from Grace to the empty screen. The echo of that silence is louder than any gunshot. I straighten my shoulders, feeling the compass knit its needle into place, due north, toward justice. And I notice the single poppy petal lifting from my lapel, drifting down like a mourning dove. It lands on Grace's polished shoe. She freezes. Her smile falters for a heartbeat, and then the first frame of the video blinks into view. Grainy at first, then crystal clear me crawling through scorched earth, dragging Colonel Carter across shattered pavement, blood visible on my sleeve in streaks that glitter like ruby. The wedding string quartet holds its breath. At that moment, I realize this is no longer a family affair. This is a reckoning. The invitation in my pocket burns through the fabric. I let my fingertips brush the edge of it, and I remind myself sometimes the only way forward is through the very place they told you never to return. And as the images roll, I feel something shift inside me, quiet, resolute. A storm barely contained. Because now everyone will see what I already know: honor doesn't need an invitation. It demands recognition. In that pregnant pause before Grace can stammer an apology, before my mother can look away, I lift my chin and lock eyes with the crowd. Soldiers, civilians, reporters, each one a witness to the truth. And I stay right there, letting the silence speak until the first soldier stands. When the first soldier rose, it was like the crack of a starting gun echoing across the marble hall. I felt the soft scrape of his polished black shoe on the floor, heard the subtle intake of breath as that one crisp hand lifted to his temple. My heart pounded against my ribs, but I didn't flinch. I simply let the moment wash over me. Then another stood, and another. In seconds, a wave of uniforms, army greens, navy blues, gleaming Air Force dress uniforms swept across the room. They came from every corner, every table. Colonels who had once briefed me, captains I'd mentored, enlisted troops I'd pulled back from the brink. They didn't hesitate, didn't pause to whisper or debate. They just stood and saluted. I could feel the weight of each salute like a benediction, like the earth itself shifting beneath the polished floor. My compass needle spun on my wrist until it steadied, pointing straight down the center aisle toward truth. The red poppy over my heart felt suddenly alive, its petals trembling. Above us, the giant LED screen flared back to life, the video looping in slow motion, my booted feet dragging across that gravel road in Baghdad, the haze of dust and blood and gunfire behind me. The station's chandeliers stilled their glitter. The cell phones clicking silently in every hand became a single hush. There was no scuffle, no frantic scramble. Nothing could interrupt that pure, unspoken declaration. I remained seated at table 17, my spine unbending, my eyes locked on that ribbon of soldiers. Because power I knew wasn't shouting, it was stillness. Soft murmurs rose from the civilian tables. What's happening? Is this part of the show? Social media commentators started live captioning "Breaking Mystery Soldier, honored at Carter wedding," #Honor Morgan surges as guests stand. I caught Chloe Kim's eye. Hers reflected a mixture of pride and relief, and she gave me a subtle nod. Even in that swell of emotion, I felt a flicker of vulnerability. What if this was somehow a setup? What if the Carter family had orchestrated this grand gesture to deflect from Grace's original slight? My mind darted back to the day I discovered that anonymous Pentagon memo calling into question my combat report, to the way my promotion had stalled without explanation. I'd traced that foul handwriting to my own sister's English teacher, handwriting the exact same loops and slants she used to correct my college essays. I'd buried that anger deep, but only months before I'd found the torn photocopy hidden under her desk, proof of the smear campaign at work. Now I wondered if every saluting soldier was part of a bigger ruse, If this honor guard was loyal to Colonel Carter's PR machine instead of to me. I glanced at Marcus and Gwen, whose phone hovered over Grace's trembling face, and he caught my eye with a silent promise. "I've got your back." That brief exchange was enough to steady me. I realized this moment wasn't about performing trust. It was about choosing it. Grace Carter stood frozen beside the microphone stand. Her mouth parted as though she'd forgotten the words to her own speech. Her mascara had begun to streak, and the spotlight's glare made her silver dress look almost ghostly. Our mother hovered just behind her in a pale blue suit. Lips pursed so tight, I could almost hear them crack. In that beat of silence, I saw the entire family tableau laid bare grace the polished facade, Mom the architect of exclusion, me the ghost they denied. But the soldiers had spoken for me. Their rigid postures, the uniformity of each salute, it was more eloquent than any apology they could muster. I rose slowly, letting the rustle of my dress uniform fill the hush. The hall camera swung toward me. My image filled the screen beside the looped rescue footage. I felt the heat of 100,000 eyeballs, live viewers, wedding guests, nameless onlookers, but my face remained composed. I lifted my chin and allowed a single deliberate breath to slip out, bracing myself for what came next. Then came the risk. I stepped away from my seat, the soles of my boots clicking on the marble. Every step echoed like a drumbeat, a signal that I was taking command of my own narrative. I crossed the space between the soldiers and the family cluster at the head table, walking through a gauntlet of phones raised in silent inquiry. I could see the aides whispering furiously, event staff nudging each other in confusion. The orchestra benches empty where the string quartet had abandoned their bows mid-note. I reached the microphone, its stand unsteady, and slipped my left hand over it. The poppy at my chest felt hot against my palm, like a living wound. I didn't need words to acknowledge the soldiers. Their salute had done that. Instead, I said in a voice low enough to draw them in, "I'm not here for a trophy. I'm here for truth." The first click of a shutter sounded like thunder. Grace's hand flew up as if she wanted to clap, but the clap would have sounded hollow. My mother's face went white, and I could practically hear her panic. She mouthed a frantic "stop," but no sound emerged. The room folded in on itself. Civilians exchanged puzzled glances, and the generals, once the sternest pillars of decorum, now looked like schoolkids caught in a storm. On the screen behind me, the rescue footage kept running, looping images of me, laboring under fire, the dust billowing, Colonel Carter's hand tightening on my shoulder. I looked at Grace and said, "You tried to erase me. You tried to rewrite my record. You tried to rob me of every ounce of honor I earned at the cost of my life." I watched her shoulders slump, the betrayal she'd woven into family lore unraveling in real time. But truth isn't something you can Photoshop out. I paused, letting the words sink into the electric air. The screen's glow highlighted the tear tracks on Grace's cheeks. Even our mother turned toward her, horror flickering across her features. I felt the compass on my wrist pulse, as if it approved this course. In one fluid motion, I unclipped the metal cluster from my chest, a group of silver and bronze stars that had meant everything to me, and held it out. The world went still again. "This belonged to me," I said, voice steady. "But it belongs to every soldier who's ever answered the call and come home to an empty chair." I placed the medals on the podium at the base of the mic stand, as though laying a wreath. A solitary tear rolled down one cheek, and I didn't wipe it away. "I'm not your daughter," I told Grace, "not when you deny my service. I'm Morgan Hayes, and this is for the rest of us." Then I turned, walked back toward my seat, every eye following my retreating back. The hush stretched until I could hear my own blood roaring in my ears. But the twist came seconds later. The station's giant clock chimed 7 o'clock, and the live stream switched feeds to a shot of the divorce papers Grace had filed against her husband, the family's private drama spilling onto tabloid news tickers, and the hashtags #FamilyFeud and #HayesCarter. Scandal trending north of Honor Morgan. In the corner of the screen, a new caption scrolled, "Exclusive Carter siblings bitter war. Wedding of the year turns ugly." The audience murmured. Some phones flashed blue notifications of incoming angry comments. How could she do that to her sister PR stunt, or justice. The social media tide turned from celebration to spectacle, dragging Grace into a whirlpool of suspicion. Our mother gasped, collapsing onto the back of her chair, and Grace staggered, catching herself on an empty table. I stood up again, instinct pulling me forward. This was no longer just my story. It was theirs too, twisted by every click and share. I raised a hand in a half salute once more, this time to the cameras, to every viewer scrolling through pixels at home, and I whispered, "Truth doesn't end here." Then I stalked off the stage toward the exit tunnel beneath the grand arch, leaving Maxwell Catering's silver doors swinging open behind me. The hall began to buzz, some with sympathy for me, some with relish at Grace's downfall. But I kept walking past the static hush and the distant echo of the soldier salute into the cool evening air of Union Station's courtyard. Outside, the dusk had settled into a lavender sky, punctuated by the Washington Monument's silhouette. The smell of cherry blossoms lingered incongruous against the platform lights and the hum of arriving trains. My compass lay warm on my wrist, now pointing away from the station towards something unknown. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Dr. Evelyn Parker, the military psychologist who'd counseled me after my last deployment. I saw, "Proud of you. Be safe." Another from Sam Ortiz, "Meet me at the north exit. I've got your back." My pulse began to slow. Adrenaline loosened its grip. But beneath the relief was a fresh knot of uncertainty once the world saw the truth. What came next? Would the Pentagon reopen that internal review? Would my mother's apology ever materialize? Would Grace fight back in court or retreat into regret? I pressed my palm over that lone red poppy, feeling its silk petals quiver, and reminded myself that even a single bloom in a sea of white could change the landscape. I stepped onto the cobblestone path leading away from Union Station, boots clicking in the gathering gloom, and I dared to hope that this reckoning was only the beginning. But as the station lights receded, I realized that the real battle against lies, against wounds that never fully heal, was about to begin. I stepped through the courtyard archway at Union Station, each boot heel clicking against the cobblestones like a metronome, winding down the tension in my chest. The lavender dusk hovered over D.C. Aya's skyline and the Washington Monument silhouette stood silent witness as I drew in a steady breath, trying to center myself. My compass, still strapped to my wrist, pointed due north, unwavering, as if reminding me that if I stayed true to myself, I wasn't lost. I could taste the cherry blossoms in the air, sweet and unexpected, against the oily hum of arriving trains. And I realized that the world beyond that grand hall was still turning oblivious to the storm I'd just unleashed. Behind me, the sliding doors hissed shut, sealing off the bright lights and glittering chaos of the Carter wedding reception. My phone buzzed again in my jacket pocket. A text from Chloe Kim. "Uploading raw footage now. Expect national outlets in 10. My pulse kicked up. This was the double-edged sword of modern truth. Exposing my rescuing Colonel Carter and outing the smear my sister orchestrated meant I'd own the field of battle again. But this time the enemy wasn't in a dusty combat zone. It was social perception, family betrayal, and the fragile architecture of public opinion. I knew the moment that footage went live, every major network, every military blog, every late-night show would replay it, dissect it, debate it. It would be on the jaws of journalists for days. In a way, this was riskier than any mission in Helmand or Baghdad. Because I wasn't wearing body armor, I was just Morgan Hayes, 38, Deputy Surgeon General, West Point graduate daughter, cast aside. I rounded the corner into a narrow passage leading to the station's north exit. The glow of the feed on my lock screen showed pixelated frames of me dragging Colonel Carter over shrapnel-strewn ground, blood and dust streaking my uniform, sweat and determination etched onto my face. I stared at that image long enough to feel a pang of something like regret that I'd never properly thanked everyone who'd carried me, when I couldn't stand regret that my silence had let my own family believe lies. I tapped share, sending the raw clip and a simple message. They tried to erase me. This is the truth. Honor Morgan. No commentary, no flourish, just fact. In that instant, my inner voice whispered, "Don't let their silence deafen you." Outside, the station's platform lights bathed the plaza in cool white. Sam Ortiz was waiting by a bench, her dark hair pulled into a practical ponytail. Her civilian nurse scrubs swapped for a loose denim jacket and jeans. She waved without a word, and I recognized the same steady determination in her eyes that drove me to keep going when half my comrades couldn't. We hugged briefly, awkwardly, because hugs always felt too sentimental in the face of everything, but it was enough. "They're on it," she said softly. I saw the network alerts. "You broke the internet." I let out a short laugh, half relief, half disbelief. I just stood still. I answered the compass on my wrist, feeling like an anchor. She nodded. Standing still sometimes demands the most courage. We moved away from the entrance, ducking under a marquee advertising train to Alexandria, 11:15 p.m. I wondered if I should catch that train and disappear somewhere cold and quiet, far from hashtags and flashing cameras. But I knew running away would feed the narrative I was avoiding. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened my email, hundreds of messages, already flooding in, some from forgotten high school friends who said sorry, some from active duty soldiers, thanking me for giving them a voice, and hundreds more from people I'd never met, sharing stories of family betrayal, of feeling erased, abandoned, judged. I glanced at one from a captain in the Army Reserves. I sat at my brother's wedding and watched him say my name, only to check its spelling. "Thank you for standing still." My chest tightened. Since when did my wounds matter so much to strangers? Since when did my silence become their silence? A second text from Dr. Evelyn Parker, the military psychologist who'd taught me about trauma's long shadow. "Let's debrief tomorrow." I booked therapy room 402 at Walter Reed. You need a safe space. Therapy felt like admitting weakness, but I recalled the days I spent unraveling nightmares, dreams where I was back on that gravel road, the blast ripping apart everything I believed. I typed a quick reply, "I'll be there. Thanks." Sam glanced at my open phone. "You gotta eat," she chided gently. "They left a plate for you in the Green Eggs and Ham Cafe. It's roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and string beans. No champagne." I smiled at the familiar name, a sort of gallows humor from the station's catering partner, and nodded. "Lead the way." We slipped back inside under a side door, cutting through a storage hallway that smelled of cleaning solvents and cardboard crates. I followed her past rolling carts, loaded with silver chafing dishes still warm from earlier, until we found a small table set with a single platter. I sat, and Sam poured 2 waters. "Here's your line of defense," she said, pushing the plate toward me. "Nutrition." I dug in, letting the heat of the food chase away the chill that lingered at my core. Each bite grounded me the tender chicken, the buttery potatoes, the snap of green beans. I thought of the dozens of small bases where I'd eaten worse rations under mortar fire, and I felt a strange gratitude for something so simple. As I ate, Sam sat across from me, arms folded. "Your family is in shock," she observed. "Your mother, Barbara Hale, called me when I was treating a vet in Des Moines. She sounded hollow." I closed my eyes. I remembered the countless times my mother had coached me to smile for photos, to be the perfect soldier daughter, and then deliberately overlooked me at every dinner and holiday. "She'll call me next," I murmured. "She'll try to fix it." Sam's mouth tightened. "Just don't let her gaslight you again. You know the rules, no falling back into their script." I nodded. I owed her one more reset after that night in Stuttgart, when she talked me out of quitting the Army. My phone buzzed again, an incoming video call from Chloe. I clicked accept. Her face filled the screen, framed by the cluttered chaos of her home office Army fatigues, hanging on a coat rack, camera gear sprawled on the desk. "Look," she said, sliding the phone to show her monitor footage of commentators in white coat studios flashing the still of my poppy-draped chest and the posted tweet. "They're dissecting every nuance. Some say it's a publicity stunt, others are calling for congressional hearings on defamation. People want to know what happens next." I swallowed. The logic twist was already emerging. The same social media mechanisms that elevated me could just as easily tear me down. If I wasn't careful, the narrative would shift from truth revealed to spoiler-destroyed wedding. "I need to own the next move," I said. "We have to control the story before they control it." Chloe's eyes flicked with agreement. "I've drafted a piece first-person account. Raw, unfiltered, no legalese." I closed my eyes against the station's harsh fluorescence, then post it globally. I'll record the audio tonight. We hung up, and the weight of the decision settled like new armor across my shoulders. I finished the last bites of chicken and stood brushing crumbs from my lap. Let's set up the live stream from my place, I said. I'll speak to them directly. Sam nodded, then hesitated. Morgan, what about rest? What about decompression? I met her gaze and saw concern that mirrored my own doubts. Rest can wait, I said. Right now, I need clarity. I pocketed my phone and compass, and we made our way out through a back corridor that led to the station's underground parking garage. The drive back to my apartment in Capitol Hill was a blur of red lights and radio static. News tickers scrolled across the dashboard's infotainment screen. Morgan Hayes breaks silence. Sister speaks out, Grace Carter issues no apology. Pentagon to review 12-year-old files. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, feeling every pulse of adrenaline that had sustained me through combat surges now powering me through a different battlefield. As I pulled into my reserved spot, I glanced at the rearview mirror. The poppy pin gleamed on my lapel, bright as a beacon. It felt like a vow I had made not just to myself, but to every service member who'd ever been expunged from their own story. Inside my apartment was quiet too quiet after the roar of the station. The windows looked onto a row of pastel row houses, their curtains drawn for privacy. I flicked on the TV and muted the volume, letting the scrolling headlines wash over me as I powered up my laptop. Sam sat beside me on the couch, pulling her legs under her and handing me a blanket. You were right, she said. We need to speak. I clicked open the draft Chloe had sent, a first-person essay, beginning with my name and rank, diving unflinchingly into every detail from the moment my mother scrubbed my name off the invitation to the split-second decision to crawl back under fire for Colonel Carter. The words jumped off the page raw and urgent. As I read, I felt the familiar thrum of resolve solidify in my chest. This was the story I had to tell. I hit record on my webcam and leaned forward, the ambient glow painting half my face in blue light. My name is Major General Morgan Hayes. I began echoing the cadence that had opened so many briefings and testimonies. My voice was calm but firm. I served my country in combat zones you'll never see under conditions you can't imagine. I saved lives, lost friends, and earned every medal on my chest. But at home, I was erased. I spoke of the countless times I was told to hide my uniform, of the letter that delayed my promotion, of the tender poppy I wore to remember those who didn't come home. As I spoke, the video feed captured the compass on my wrist, the poppy over my heart, and the pile of medals resting on my desk. Silent symbols of duty, memory, and sacrifice. I looked directly into the camera, into the eyes of every viewer. This isn't about revenge. It's about recognition. If you've ever been told your story doesn't matter, know this: you belong. Your truth matters. And together we will not be silenced. I ended the live stream and exhaled so hard I nearly tipped forward. Sam reached out and squeezed my hand. You did it, she whispered. My heart thundered, but beneath the roar was a seed of something gentler hope. I saved the recording, queued it for global release at midnight, and set an alarm to wake me when it went live. Then I lay back on the couch blanket over my shoulders and stared at the ceiling. The city lights glowed through the window, the hush of the night pressing in. Part of me wanted to drift into sleep, to let the aftermath wash over me tomorrow. But another part of me, the part that had crawled through open fire, whispered, You haven't finished the mission. Because the biggest battle wasn't convincing strangers or shaming my sister. It was reclaiming myself from every lie I'd been told. And that work had only just begun. As my eyes drifted shut, I heard the faint buzz of my phone, a new email notification. My chest tightened with anticipation. I reached for it, half expecting another wave of supportive messages. Instead, the subject line read, Legal notice cease and desist. Carter Family Council. My breath caught. I stared at the screen, mind racing. A new front in this war had just opened, and I realized the next move would demand every ounce of resolve I had left. I tore open the crisp envelope in my apartment living room, heart thudding against my ribs like distant artillery. The Carter family's legal notice stared up at me in black and white type, a stern warning to cease and desist all broadcasts related to private family affairs. or face immediate litigation for defamation, emotional distress, and breach of privacy. My compass lay on the coffee table beside me, its needle quivering between north and what's next. The red poppy I'd worn at Union Station crumpled beside it like a fallen flag. I slid onto the edge of the sofa, the late-night glow of my laptop illuminating the letter's bold, urgent stamp. For a moment, I felt the weight of 1,000 battlefield threats compress me back into the younger Morgan, who'd lain bleeding in a gravel lot, wondering if each breath was her last. This was different. The enemy was a suit and tie, not a sniper's scope. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus Nguyen saw the notice. "You need counsel. I can send you my guy." I texted back, "Send him over." I folded the letter and tucked it into my jacket pocket as if it were a live grenade. The poppy, once a symbol of remembrance, now felt like the target painted on my chest. I rose, smoothed the front of my blazer, and walked toward the door. My boots clicked on the hardwood floor, each step echoing resolve. I needed a plan. Silence wasn't an option, not now. 15 minutes later, my apartment buzzed with the arrival of a man in a navy suit and horn-rimmed glasses, defense attorney Nolan Reeves, recommended by Marcus. He perched on the arm of my sofa briefcase at his feet. His expression was calm but alert, the sort of calm you learn in law school when you realize you might spend a decade in court before you win. I offered him coffee. He declined. "Let's talk strategy," he said, opening his case. He laid out the Carter notice, then leaned forward. "They threatened defamation because you spoke publicly. They'll argue wedding was private. But you introduced facts. You saved Colonel Carter's life. The smear campaign is documented. Truth is the ultimate defense." I exhaled, the tightness in my chest easing slightly. "So I'm safe?" He shook his head. "They'll drag this through discovery. You'll be subpoenaed. Depositions, private emails exposed. Your family's secrets might not be the only ones unearthed." My pulse picked up again. "What about countersuit?" Nolan's lips curved. "You can file for malicious prosecution or tortious interference. But that drags you deeper." I pictured my neat apartment flooded with boxes of documents, every email, every text laid bare in court. That wasn't just risk, it was a full frontal assault on my privacy. Yet beneath the fear, something stirred a flicker of purpose. If I was going to fight, it would be on my own terms. "We proceed," I said, voice steady. But we set the tone. I don't cower. The next morning, I arrived at the Pentagon's Inspector General office compass, still strapped to my wrist. The halls smelled of institutional polish and stale coffee, but I kept my head high. Behind me trailed Marcus Nguyen and Chloe Kim, holding cameras for a press background. I signed in, declared my intent to file a formal complaint about the anonymous memo that questioned my combat actions, and named my sister as the author. The IG clerk's eyes widened, scanning the list of allegations. "This will open an investigation." I nodded. "I want every scrap reviewed." The clerk handed me a folder stamped "Confidential." I felt the poppy in my pocket, as if it were alive with energy. I pressed my thumb over it, memory, honor, defiance. By the time I left, news crews had gathered outside. Reporters craned their necks, mics extended. "Major General Hayes." "Will you apologize to your family?" one shouted. Another asked, "Do you regret posting the video?" I raised a hand and held it there, palm out. The world narrowed down to the red of the poppy pinned to my lapel. "I'm not here to apologize for truth," I said. "I'm here to demand accountability." That sentence rippled across live feeds, the poppy glowing bright in HD. As the cameras clicked away, I sensed the first crack in the Carter's armor, forced transparency. Back in my car, I exhaled and pressed the poppy between my fingers. The day's events had been a gamble. Invoking IG review meant I'd put classified military paperwork under a public microscope, but it was a risk I had to take. If the anonymous memo held classified details, the IG would expose it. If not, they'd clear my name. Ambiguity was my ally, but a new conflict gnawed at me: loyalty to the uniform versus loyalty to the family name. Social media and journalists had framed it as family versus country, but I refused to play that zero-sum game. I believed you could honor both if both sides honored you in return. Yet now the uniform's code yanked at me, silence order, chain of command. And the poppy's flame flickered with the memory of the lives I'd saved. Whose code was stronger, the one that bound me to duty, or the one that demanded I speak truth regardless of the price? Back home, Dr. Evelyn Parker awaited me. In her cozy office shelves, lined with psychology texts, a single poppy print adoring the wall. She gestured to a leather chair. "How are you?" she asked gently. I sat the legal notice feeling heavy in my jacket. "Determined," I said, and terrified. That was the first honest confession I'd made since the wedding. She nodded. "Courage isn't absence of fear. It's action despite fear." Nodding, I closed my eyes, feeling the poppy's presence in my pocket, and talked through every twist, the cease and desist, the tribunal risk, the public spectacle at the Pentagon. Evelyn listened, eyes soft but focused. When I finished, she handed me a small box. "I want you to hold this when anxiety spikes." I opened it to reveal a tiny metal compass pendant on a simple chain. "Symbol of your inner truth," she said. "Spin it, feel its weight. It reminds you where north is your moral north." I clasped it around my neck, the cold metal resting above my heart, alongside the scar tissue I carried there, literal and figurative. In that moment, I felt anchored. Later that evening, I stood on the balcony of my Capitol Hill apartment city, lights twinkling like distant stars. My phone glowed with notifications, tweets, praising my IG, filing threads, debating defamation law photos of the compass pendant, trending as the new #MorganCompass symbol. I realized that the poppy and compass had become twin emblems, one honoring sacrifice, the other guiding truth. But social media's fickle nature meant the pendulum could swing hard in the other direction. A misstep, a misquote, and the narrative could flip to vindictive General Haras's family. I closed my eyes against the breeze, tasting the night air tinged with freedom and fear. My inner voice stirred. "You've lit the fuse. Now make sure the explosion clears the path, not buries you." My phone buzzed again, this time an email from Grace Carter. Subject: "We need to talk." My chest tightened. After everything, public betrayals, legal threats, IG investigations. She wanted a conversation. Was it a trap? A damage control tactic? Or a genuine crack in her armor? The email was brief. "Morgan, I know I've hurt you. Let's meet tomorrow at noon at the National Shrine." Alone. My thumb hovered over delete and reply. The compass pendant swung lightly against my chest, tracing a line to true north. I typed noon at the shrine. 1 hour, no lawyers. Then I sat back against the railing eyes on the Capitol dome, looming like a silent judge. The stakes were higher than ever. Risk no longer meant viral videos or military tribunals, but a personal reckoning with the sister who'd rewritten my story. I clutched the compass pendant, the poppy beside me, pinned to the railing, and watched it droop in the gentle night breeze. Tomorrow, I would decide whether to trust her. And in that choice lay the next battle between forgiveness and self-preservation, between family bonds and personal honor. My breath caught between those two poles, and I realized the hardest mission was just beginning. I arrived at the National Shrine just after noon, the late spring sun slanting through the cherry blossoms like pale confetti. The air smelled of stone and incense, a hush of reverence that made every footstep sound louder. My compass pendant rested against my collarbone, a steady weight reminding me where true north lay. And the poppy I'd pinned to my lapel felt like a living heartbeat over my own. I found Grace waiting beside the winged statue of St. Joseph, her silver dress subdued to charcoal gray under the afternoon light. She looked smaller somehow. No armor of PR polish, just Grace shoulders, tense lips pressed in a line I recognized all too well. When she saw me, her breath caught, and she lifted a hand in awkward greeting. I kept my face calm, though my pulse flickered because I'd spent a lifetime mastering stillness under fire. We stood a few paces apart, two sisters on a narrow path paved with our family's pride and resentment. The shrine's marble benches stood empty behind her silent witnesses to every confession that would come. I folded my arms, heart steady. This meeting was my choice, and I intended to see it through. Grace's voice trembled when she finally spoke, a burst of words pouring out like water from a dam. "Morgan, I'm so sorry." She paused, swallowing the apology she'd rehearsed 1,000 times. I watched her throat work, the way her fingers twined together. The cherry petals drifted down around us, and for a moment the world felt suspended. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, voice low. "Mother, she forced me. Told me if I didn't remove you from the wedding, she'd ruin my career, our reputation. She said no one would ever take our family seriously if we looked divided." I felt the edges of my resolve fray. All those years I'd been angry with Grace, blamed her for every slight, every erased name on every holiday card. But hearing her pain, her fear of our mother's wrath, shook something loose inside me. Still, I drew in a breath of incense-scented air and let it out slow. "You let her weaponize me," I said, voice even. "That's not forgiveness. That's betrayal." Grace's eyes filled with tears, and she tried to reach for me, but I stepped back, my compass swinging lightly against my chest. "You still had a choice," I reminded her, though my heart ached to believe she didn't. We stood there, two sisters separated by steel bars of loyalty and lies, the statue's outstretched hand frozen between us, like a plea for mercy. Then Grace did something I never expected. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a sealed envelope, the Carter family crest stamped on its flap. Her hand shook so badly, I half expected the paper to crumple. "I found this in Mother's desk," she said, voice cracking. "It's the original memo, classified stuff she stole to smear you. I didn't know until last week." I stared at that envelope like it was a grenade with the pin still in my pulse hammering. "She lied about me," I whispered. "Used official seals, fabricated details." Grace nodded, tears spilling freely now. She said she was protecting the family name, but she was just protecting herself. I kept my gaze on the envelope, its edges crisp and dangerous. I thought about every promotion stalled, every private humiliation, every memory I'd doubted, because her lies had made me doubt myself. The compass on my chest felt hot, guiding me toward the truth Grace was offering. But the twist, the real twist, was that my sister, the person I'd written off as heartless, had been trapped in the same twisted game. I realized that forgiveness wasn't a surrender, but a tool, a way to dismantle the lies built against both of us. Yet fear flickered at the edges. What if this was another manipulation? What if Mother had set Grace up to feed me false absolution? I reached out, fingertips hovering over the envelope's seal, and felt the weight of choice settle in my bones. The shrine behind us echoed with a distant chanting, as though the saints themselves waited for my decision. I looked at Grace. Her mascara streaked, her dress crumpled at the hem. And I heard my own voice, the one that kept me moving through sand and smoke and betrayal. "Show it to the IG," I said softly, nodding toward the folder in my coat pocket. "Let them see it all, every page, every forged signature." Grace blinked, hope and terror warring in her eyes. I unfastened the clasp and broke the seal, pulling out the yellowed memo. Even in the sunlight, it looked sinister. Red ink scrawled, "Confidential," at the top, followed by paragraphs of accusation that ended with my name typed in bold. I tucked it into my pocket and looked up at the statue again, its wings outspread like an invitation to rise above old battles. "We'll file this together," I said, lifting my chin. "No more secrets." Grace exhaled so hard she stumbled, and I caught her arm. Her hand trembled on my forearm as she whispered, "Thank you." I gave her a brief, almost imperceptible nod, because this wasn't about thanks. It was about accountability. We left the shrine under that canopy of pale petals, walking side by side, though our shoulders still didn't touch. The Capitol dome glinted in the distance, a silent promise of justice or spectacle. I couldn't tell which yet. My compass pendant swung in rhythm with my steps, pointing us both forward, into a territory neither of us had mapped. I thought about the next move: joint testimony, before the IG, then public statement, to unify our family's story before the media spun it again. But even as I planned, a new conflict stirred between the desire to heal and the need to protect myself. Could I trust Grace not to falter again? Would our mother retaliate with something worse? The social currents were already shifting. Carter sisters trending hashtags alternating between sister solidarity and family feud. I felt the pull of public opinion, a tide that could either lift us or drag us under. Grace glanced at me, eyes wide, and asked, "Do you really forgive me?" I closed my eyes against the breeze, tasting cherry blossoms and fear. When I opened them, I replied simply, "We'll see." And with that, the world tilted on its axis. Forgiveness no longer a destination, but a journey we'd walk together, uncertain of every step. As we stepped out onto the city sidewalk, the blossoms drifting around us like unfinished prayers, I realized the hardest battle wasn't unearthing the truth, it was deciding what to do with it next. That question hovered between us, heavy as the poppy at my lapel, as we rounded the corner into the waiting glare of a new day. I woke before dawn the next morning, the compass pendant cold against my throat, and the city's lights still dim through my bedroom windows. I reread the calendar reminder, IG hearing, 0900, HR's Pentagon Confi Hisrum 4B. My heart hammered in a familiar rhythm, the same cadence that once told me the next step could be life or death in a combat zone. Today, the stakes were no less high, a room full of inspectors, colonels in starched uniforms, civilian lawyers ready to challenge every claim I'd made. I dressed in my service dress again, the metal cluster pinned over my heart like a shield, the single red poppy tucked into the lapel's buttonhole. As I crossed my living room, the sunrise cast long shadows, and I paused at the framed photo of my late father in his own uniform. His eyes seemed to bore into mine, as if urging me onward. I closed my eyes, inhaled, and whispered, for truth. The Pentagon Hall smelled of polished concrete and buzzing fluorescence. By the time I entered room 4B, my sister Grace was already there, standing at the far end of the horseshoe table, her charcoal dress giving way to a softer gray under the harsh lights. She gave me a tentative nod. I returned it, trying to convey solidarity without words. Colonel Carter sat 2 seats over, clean-shaven, and wearing a simple suit, his posture relaxed but attentive. Across the table, the IG lead, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, no relation, cleared his throat and asked Major General Hayes, "Would you summarize your complaint?" I felt the compass needle on my necklace thrum against my sternum. "Yes, sir." I began, voice clear. I allege that a classified department memo was fabricated to impede my promotion. I request a full audit of my personnel records interviews with involved parties and disclosure of any evidence pointing to the memo's author. Questions came rapid-fire points of procedure, chain of command inquiries, legal jurisdiction. Each time I answered, I pictured myself back in a firefight, scanning for threats, trusting my training. The twist logic emerged when the IG asked Grace to testify next, her admission that our mother used her position to steal classified material underlined my statements more powerfully than any speculation could. In that moment, the family secret became undeniable fact. The IG chair tapped his pen, leaned back, and said, "We will proceed with a formal investigation and suspend any adverse action pending findings." A win, but a cautious one. The room exhaled. I felt the tension drain, but left my heart racing. As we stood to leave, Colonel Carter caught my eye, offered a genuine salute, and quietly said, "Proud of you, General." I nodded, but my mouth was dry pride tinged with sorrow for the trust lost and slowly rebuilt. Outside the hearing room, Grace slipped an envelope into my hand, a handwritten apology from our mother sealed with the Carter crest. "She wants to make amends," Grace whispered, voice trembling. I thumbed the seal but didn't open it. Instead, I let the card rest against my chest over my poppy. I realized reconciliation would be its own campaign brimmed with risk. And as the automated doors swooshed behind me, I felt the first real weight of possibility and of unanswered questions settle between us. 3 weeks later, the Resilience Foundation's inaugural gala shimmered beneath the chandeliers of the Washington Hilton Ballroom. I stood at the podium in civilian attire, navy sheath dress, compass pendant, visible at my collar, flanked by Colonel Carter and Grace, who now wore a soft blue ensemble that matched the Foundation's logo. The room was packed with veterans in uniform, military families, advocacy groups, and dozens of journalists. Hashtags like #HonorResilience and #MorganHayes trended worldwide. As I began to speak, I noticed a stray poppy pinned to a table near the back, someone's tribute, I realized, and I felt a familiar warmth. I spoke of truth and trust, yes, of the wounds that fester when lies go unchallenged, and of the power of standing still in the face of betrayal. Behind me, a giant screen rotated images, my boots. In Baghdad dust, Grace handing me the forged memo, the IG hearing freeze frame, and finally, the poppy drifting onto the Hilton's polished floor the night of the gala's setup. The audience was silent, rapt. When I finished, a single stem of red poppy petals folded into a paper crane drifted from a vent above, fluttering to the stage. I caught it in my palm, the delicate paper soft as forgiveness. Applause rose in waves, but I didn't clap. I bowed my head, feeling both the foundation's bright promise and the fragile tightrope beneath it. Afterward, I moved through the crowd, thanking donors meeting families who'd been broken by neglect or stigma, and promising that resilience would be more than lip service. Grace joined me at the end of the line, her eyes shining with tears. "We did it," she said. I squeezed her arm. "We started," I corrected, because building trust was a marathon, not a sprint. But beneath our success, I felt the undercurrent of expectation. Would our mother claim credit? Would some media outlet twist our story into another feud? The final poppy petal drifted to my foot as I stepped away, and I realized the night's work was not done until every petal had been gathered, every promise kept. That evening, back at my apartment, I unfolded our mother's letter. Her handwriting trembled. Confessions, apologies, pleas for forgiveness. She wrote of fear of love, twisted into control, of how proud she was of me, yet too blinded by a reputation to show it. I folded the note and placed it in a glass frame on my desk beneath my father's photograph and above the poppy in a sealed vial. Family, I realized, could be both battlefield and refuge. I closed my eyes and reached for the compass pendant, letting its weight remind me of north. My moral compass unbroken. My phone buzzed with a late-night message, urgent, from an unknown number. I opened it, a single line of text, and a web link, proof of mother's next move. My breath caught. As the link loaded, I glimpsed the subject line of an email, new partnership proposal, Carter Legacy Trust. Images followed plans to merge our foundation with the Carter estate, a PR pitch claiming family unity stronger than ever. My stomach twisted. Was this another attempt to co-opt our mission? Another risk waiting in the wings. The compass pendant swung on its chain, pointing neither to the past nor the future, but to the space between what I hoped for and what I must guard against. I pressed reply, fingers hovering over the keyboard, heart pounding with that familiar thrill, the call to action, the uncertainty, the power of choice. And I realized this was the real beginning, deciding whether to extend an olive branch or hold the line, whether family bonds could be rebuilt or would always be battlegrounds. As I stared at the screen, the wind rattled my window pane and the compass needle quivered. Between that quiver and the glow of my laptop, I felt the hush of possibility and of new risks waiting just beyond the horizon.